The rhythmic click of a federal security badge being programmed was the last sound Marcus Cole heard before stepping into a life that wasn't his. 3 weeks from now, he would stand in a glass-walled boardroom on the 40th floor of Meridian Financial's Portland headquarters, watching the most powerful man in Pacific Northwest corporate finance realize that the quiet black man he had ordered removed from the building was the architect of his destruction. But that moment lived in the future. This morning, Marcus Cole was nobody. 5:45. The alarm never got the chance. 14 years of military discipline had wired his body to surface before any clock could claim credit, and he moved through the narrow galley kitchen of his East Side Portland apartment with the efficiency of a man who had long ago eliminated waste from every corner of his life. Rent, $847. Checking account balance as of last night, $412.63. Electric bill due Friday, $89. He did not dwell on the arithmetic. The numbers were simply coordinates on a map he had already committed to crossing. On the small table beside the refrigerator sat two worlds. On the left, a bowl of cereal with a sliced banana arranged in a smiley face, a ritual he had maintained every morning since Elena's hands became too weak to hold the knife. On the right, a matte black laptop displaying a 256-bit encrypted partition containing 6 months of preliminary federal intelligence on Meridian Financial's vendor payment infrastructure. His actual contract rate with the Federal Accountability Office was $400 per hour, payable upon mission completion. Until then, he bled savings and called it investment. The bedroom door creaked open. Zoe appeared in mismatched socks and a t-shirt 3 sizes too large, or dragging a papier-mâché volcano that shed green flakes across the linoleum. 7 years old, a gap where her left canine used to be, and a mind that asked questions most adults had stopped bothering to formulate. She climbed onto her chair and immediately inspected the banana arrangement. "Bah, you forgot the eyebrows." He took 2 small banana slices and placed them above the smiley face eyes. She nodded with the grave approval of a quality inspector and began eating. The volcano occupied the chair beside her like an honored guest. "You're going to fix computers again today?" "That's right. You're better than computers, Bah." He almost smiled. Almost. Sometimes the smartest thing a person can do is let everyone else believe the simple version. She considered this with a spoonful of cereal halfway to her mouth, then accepted it the way children accept weather. He braided her hair while she ate, the fingers moving with a precision that had nothing to do with military training and everything to do with 3 years of learning what Elena had made look effortless. On the wall above the microwave, a photograph, Elena Cole, 31 years old, dark skin, luminous even in the flat light of a hospital room, holding newborn Zoe against her chest. Pancreatic cancer. 8 months from diagnosis to silence. The photograph had not moved since the day he hung it, and he intended for it to stay exactly where it was for the rest of his life. He walked Zoe to the bus stop. She hugged him with one arm, the other protecting the volcano. "You'll watch my science fair, right? Promise?" "I promise." She boarded. He waited until the bus turned the corner, then took a different bus downtown. Not his car. A man earning $22 an hour did not drive to work in a vehicle that suggested otherwise. And the lobby of Meridian Financial smelled like recirculated ambition and commercial-grade carpet cleaner. Marcus clipped his temporary contractor badge to the breast pocket of a plain gray short-sleeve button-up and moved toward the elevator bank. He had already memorized the personnel files of every senior executive, every department head, every administrative assistant who had access to the financial servers. The badge read, ET Support, Contract. The laptop bag over his shoulder contained forensic imaging software capable of replicating an entire corporate database without triggering a single network alert. The elevator doors opened. He stepped inside with a group of mid-level managers carrying paper coffee cups and the comfortable posture of people who had never questioned whether they belonged in the space they occupied. At the 19th floor, Derek Simmons entered, head of human resources, 44 years old, and the man responsible for filing, cataloging, and quietly burying 73 internal complaints of racial discrimination over 6 years. Simmons glanced at Marcus, then at the badge, then at the collection of suits surrounding them. His smile was the practiced kind that HR professionals deploy when they are about to redirect someone without technically saying anything actionable. Tech support elevators around the back keeps the flow organized. My badge works here, Mr. Simmons. I know it does, but we have procedures. Keeps things orderly. Marcus stepped out at the next floor without another word. He did not need to win this exchange. He needed Simmons to believe he had. The basement-level IT workstation was exactly as depressing as the federal briefing had described. Fluorescent lighting, a shared desk with coffee rings baked into the laminate, and a server rack that hummed like a dying refrigerator. Marcus logged in with his contractor credentials, and behind the visible desktop, the forensic software began its silent replication of Meridian's vendor payment architecture. The preliminary intelligence from Washington had flagged 5 invoices from a company called Apex Logistics, all structured just under the $10,000 threshold requiring board approval. His job was not to discover. His job was to confirm, document, and build an evidentiary chain that would hold under federal cross-examination. At 11:14 that morning, the main lobby server crashed. The entire 19th through 22nd floors lost access to email, internal databases, and the shared drive containing the quarterly compliance reports. The in-house IT manager called an external contractor and quoted a 4-hour repair window. Marcus walked upstairs, sat at the terminal, and resolved the cascading database conflict in 11 minutes. He did not explain what he found nested in the query architecture. Not yet. Caroline Ashford appeared while the system rebooted. Regional CEO, Pacific Northwest Division. 42 years old. 12 years climbing a ladder that had been specifically engineered to be steeper for her than for the men who built it. She wore authority the way some people wore perfume, not applied but emanating, and she was the only person on the floor who walked directly to Marcus after the fix and said 2 words that no one else had bothered with. "Thank you." He nodded. She studied him for a half-second longer than necessary, the kind of look that a woman in her position develops after a decade of distinguishing between people who perform competence and people who simply possess it. Then she returned to her office, heels clicking against the tile, in a rhythm that suggested she had already moved on to the next problem. She had not moved on. He could tell. But the moment passed, and that was enough for now. That night, 9:17, Zoe asleep behind the bedroom door, the volcano guarding her nightstand. Marcus opened the encrypted partition. The forensic imaging software had completed its full sweep of Meridian's financial architecture, and the results confirmed everything Washington suspected while revealing a scale that exceeded the original estimate by a factor of 14. not 5 invoices from Apex Logistics, 73 transactions across 4 shell companies over 6 years. Total capital diverted, $4 million to $726,341. Every wire routed through the same offshore corridor, landing in a Cayman Islands account registered to Harrington Capital LLC. The beneficial owner of that LLC was Thomas Harrington, chairman of Meridian's audit committee, the man whose signature appeared on every quarterly compliance certification for the past 6 years, and the man who had publicly praised the integrity of the financial systems he was systematically hollowing out. Marcus sat back in the kitchen chair. The refrigerator hummed. Rain tapped against the window with the patience of something that had been falling long before anyone built walls to keep it out. He looked at Elena's photograph, and he did not speak to her because she had never needed his words to understand what he was thinking. The evidence was devastating. The timeline was clear. And somewhere in this city, Thomas Harrington was sleeping soundly in a house paid for with money stolen from the institution that trusted him to keep it safe. Marcus closed the laptop and checked on Zoe. She was curled around a stuffed elephant, breathing in the slow rhythm of a child who had not yet learned that the world contained people who would look at her and see something less than miraculous. He adjusted her blanket, returned to the kitchen, opened his phone. One missed call. Zoe's school. A voicemail from her teacher. The words careful the way adults speak when they are trying to describe something ugly without using ugly language. Something had happened. A parent. Comments made in front of children. He played the message twice. The teacher's voice strained around the edges, asking him to come in tomorrow morning. Marcus set the phone on the table beside the laptop. On one screen, 73 acts of corporate fraud. On the other, a voicemail about his daughter. He had entered this assignment believing the battlefield was confined to server rooms and boardrooms. The realization that it had followed him to the hallways of his child's elementary school landed in his chest like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples would reach every wall of his life before this was over, and the man who set this system in motion had no idea that the person he considered invisible had already mapped every crack in its foundation, and the school hallway smelled like hand sanitizer and construction paper. Marcus arrived at 8:12 wearing the same gray button-up from yesterday because the laundry cycle didn't align with crisis schedules. Zoe sat in the principal's office on a plastic chair designed for someone half her size, her volcano in her lap, a crack running down one side where the papier-mâché had separated from the base. She wasn't crying. And that was the part that put weight on his chest. She had already processed whatever happened and moved into the kind of silence that children adopt when they have decided that the adults around them cannot be trusted to fix the thing that broke. The principal, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a beaded chain, explained the situation in the careful, liability-conscious language of someone who had already consulted the district handbook. A parent volunteer during yesterday's after-school science prep. Comments made within earshot of 6 children. The specific words were not repeated in the official summary, but Zoe's teacher, a young woman who looked like she hadn't slept, filled in the margins. The parent had told her own child, loudly enough for the room to hear, that there were certain kids she shouldn't be partnering with. When Zoe asked why, the woman said nothing. The silence was the cruelest part. Zoe had turned to her volcano and worked on it alone for the remaining 40 minutes. Marcus knelt in front of his daughter. The linoleum was cold through his pant leg. Zoe looked at him with Elena's eyes, The same shade of dark brown that could hold an entire weather system without letting any of it spill. Did I do something wrong, Ba? No. He held her gaze so she could see he meant it with every part of himself. Some grown-ups carry fear they never learned to put down, when that's their weight, not yours. Mama said I'm a light. You are, and light doesn't ask permission to shine. She turned the volcano over in her hands, examining the crack. He took it from her gently, reached into his jacket pocket for the small tube of adhesive he carried because he was a man who believed in being prepared for structural failure in all its forms, and sealed the fracture with 2 precise lines of glue, held it steady for 30 seconds, handed it back. She tested the bond with one finger, found it solid, and the first small smile of the morning surfaced. He dropped Zoe at her grandmother's house, Elena's mother, 71, a woman who asked no questions when Marcus appeared on weekday mornings with a packed bag and a child who needed steadiness. The drive back downtown took 19 minutes. Marcus used every one of them. The parent volunteer who had made the comments was named Linda Prewitt. Her husband was Gregory Prewitt, procurement manager at Meridian Financial, floor 21. The same Gregory Prewitt whose email address appeared on 14 of the 73 Apex Logistics invoices as the secondary approval authority. The system that was bleeding money from Meridian was the same system that had taught Gregory Prewitt's wife that she could make a 7-year-old feel invisible and face no consequences for it. The personal and the institutional were not parallel lines. They were the same road. But that evening, in the 40th floor corner office with the view of Mount Hood that only a certain tax bracket could afford, Thomas Harrington held a video call with Derek Simmons. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. Simmons reported that an internal audit inquiry had been flagged by the system, a routine trigger from the server recovery earlier that week. Harrington's jaw tightened. He asked about the IT contractor. Simmons confirmed. Marcus Cole, clean background. E-contract expiring in 9 days. Harrington's instruction was immediate. Do not renew. Do not explain. Let the paperwork expire, and let him disappear into the stack of temporary workers who move through the building like weather. After Simmons disconnected, Harrington opened his personal laptop. The Cayman account showed a balance of $4.7 million and change. And the final extraction was already structured. $800,000 disguised as a regional server infrastructure upgrade, split across 3 purchase orders, each just under the approval threshold. Deadline, end of the month. He dialed his attorney on a prepaid phone. If anything surfaces, the new CEO signed the division transfer documents. She inherits the liability. Make sure the paper trail leads to her desk and stops. Caroline Ashford had spent 12 years building something that Thomas Harrington intended to use as a shield, and she had no idea that the man chairing her audit committee had already drafted the narrative of her professional destruction. Week 2 became Week 3 through a montage of quiet, relentless labor. Marcus worked in fragments. 90-minute blocks between his contractor shifts, late nights after Zoe's breathing settled into sleep, early mornings when Portland's streets were empty enough that the city felt like it belonged to him alone. The forensic imaging software had given him a mirror of Meridian's entire financial architecture, and he moved through it the way a surgeon moves through anatomy, with respect for the complexity and zero tolerance for the disease. The wire transfer logs told the first story. 73 transactions over 6 years, routed through 4 shell companies, Apex Logistics, Pinnacle Supply Group, Westmark Industrial, and Cascade Technical Partners. Every entity registered in different states, everyone sharing the same offshore destination. The tax identification numbers were fabricated. The EIN for Apex Logistics 472839401 returned no match in the IRS database. The other three were equally hollow. Someone had built this architecture with patience and a deep understanding of exactly where the oversight mechanisms stopped looking. The personnel records told the second story. 12 employees terminated over the same 6-year period, all Black or Latino, all in departments adjacent to the vendor payment pipeline, all dismissed within 90 days of raising questions about procurement irregularities. Every termination processed through Derek Simmons. Every exit interview documented as performance-related with language so standardized it read like it had been copied from a template. Because it had been. Marcus found the template buried in an archived HR shared drive, created in 2019, last modified by D. Simmons. On a Tuesday night in week 2, Marcus met Janet Murray at a diner 4 miles from the Meridian campus. 56 years old, former senior accountant, terminated 3 years ago after submitting a written inquiry about a $200,000 discrepancy in the Apex Logistics billing cycle. She arrived carrying a banker's box that she placed on the table between them like an offering she had been holding for someone worthy of receiving it. Inside, printed invoices, internal email threads, and a USB drive containing a recording from a March 2021 departmental meeting in which Thomas Harrington's voice, an unmistakable in its boardroom baritone, instructed the procurement team to keep Apex transactions off the primary consolidation ledger. Janet's hands trembled as Marcus examined each document. "I kept everything. 3 years. I thought maybe no one would ever come." Marcus looked at her across the scratched Formica table. Someone came. He called Agent Rivera at the Department of Justice on a secure line that same night. Rivera confirmed the scope was expanding. The same phantom vendor pattern had surfaced in Meridian branches across Seattle, Sacramento, and Denver. Total estimated diversion across 4 states, $14.2 million. 38 employees wrongfully terminated nationwide. Rivera needed 7 to 10 days to coordinate multi-state warrants. "Hold your cover, Cole. We get one shot at this." Zoe called before bed, her voice bright through the phone speaker. "Bah, the volcano works now. I put a light inside, and it glows red." He listened to her describe the LED circuit she had wired with her grandmother's help, and for 3 minutes the world contained nothing except a 7-year-old's excitement about simulated lava. "Bah is fixing something very big," she continued, repeating his words back to him with the certainty of a child who has never known her father to fail. He held the phone against his ear for a long time after she hung up. The following week, its Meridian server logs registered an unauthorized bulk deletion command executed at 2:14 in the morning. The query targeted transaction records from all 4 shell company vendor IDs across fiscal years 2019 through 2023. It required Level 3 administrative access. Only 4 people in the organization held those credentials. Marcus detected the deletion within 4 hours of arriving at his workstation. He didn't just recover the data. He captured the deletion command itself, or its origin terminal, its timestamp, and the login credentials used to execute it. The credentials belonged to an account assigned to the office of the Audit Committee Chair. Caroline Ashford was on the 22nd floor reviewing quarterly projections when the system flagged the recovery. She walked down to the IT level, something no regional CEO had done in the 3 years since the department was relocated to the basement. Marcus was sitting at the shared terminal, to the recovered data streams visible on his secondary monitor. She studied the screen over his shoulder for 10 seconds before speaking. That deletion wasn't accidental. No. You recovered records that someone with executive clearance specifically tried to destroy in 11 minutes on a contractor workstation. Her voice was calm, but her breathing had changed, the rhythm of someone recalculating an assumption they had held for weeks. Who are you, Mr. Cole? Right now, I'm the person who just saved your compliance audit from having a 6-year hole in it. He met her eyes for exactly 2 seconds, enough to communicate that the conversation had borders he was not yet ready to cross, then returned to the screen. She left without pressing further, but she didn't go back to the 22nd floor. She went to her office and pulled the server access logs herself. Thursday, 2:17 in the afternoon. Derek Simmons appeared at Marcus's workstation with a security guard and an expression that was trying very hard to look procedural rather than personal. Your contract expires this week. We've decided not to extend. Please collect your personal effects. Security will escort you out. Marcus unplugged his laptop, his personal machine, not the company's, placed it in his bag, and walked out of the building without a word. The security guard held the lobby door open with the exaggerated courtesy of a man following orders he hadn't been given a reason for. The glass doors closed behind Marcus, and Meridian Financial believed it had excised an irritant. What it had actually done was release every piece of evidence Marcus had gathered from the building's network monitoring, making it impossible for Harrington to claim the data had been extracted through unauthorized internal access. Back at the apartment, the mail slot had delivered a past due notice from the hospital billing department, $2,300 remaining on Elena's final treatment invoices. The checking account had not grown. Marcus set the envelope on the kitchen counter beside Zoe's permission slip for the science fair and a crayon drawing of a volcano with the words, "My Bay Fixes Everything," written across the bottom in uneven capitals. He stood in the kitchen for a long time, looking at the drawing. At 11 that night, Zoe asleep, the apartment silent except for rain against glass, Marcus sat on the fire escape with Elena's photograph on his phone screen. He did not speak to her. He simply sat with the image the way a man sits with a compass when he already knows the direction but needs to confirm he hasn't drifted. The doubt was there, a low hum beneath the determination, the kind that visits anyone who has bet their child's stability on their own certainty. He closed the phone, opened the laptop. The doubt remained, but the work resumed, because Marcus Cole had never in his life allowed the two to occupy the same space. Friday evening, a coffee shop 6 blocks from Meridian's campus. Caroline Ashford sat across from him in clothes he had never seen her wear. A dark sweater, no jewelry, hair pulled back. She had found his number through the contractor database. She had spent the past 48 hours reviewing server logs, deletion timestamps, and the access credential records, wherein the picture that emerged had kept her awake for 2 consecutive nights. She placed her phone on the table, showing a screenshot of the deletion command and the account that executed it. The deletion was run from the audit committee chair's credentials, Thomas Harrington. She waited for a reaction. Marcus gave her none. And the 4 shell companies whose records were targeted, they don't exist. I checked every EIN. She leaned forward. I signed the division transfer papers when I took this role. If this goes to audit without context, I'm the one holding the liability. That's not an accident, is it?" Marcus reached into his bag and placed 2 items on the table: a federal forensic auditor credential bearing his photograph and ACF certification number, and a 2-page summary of 73 transactions, 4 shell companies, $14.2 million across 4 states, and 38 wrongful terminations. He watched her read. The color left her face in stages, like a tide pulling out. "Harrington structured this so you would absorb the blame. You were never the target of the fraud. You were the target of the cover-up." Her hands flattened against the table, pressing down as if the surface might tilt. Then, slowly, her shoulders squared. The executive architecture reassembled itself around a new understanding. Her voice, when it came, I carried the cold clarity of a woman who had just identified the exact shape of the trap and was already calculating the force required to break it. "What do you need from me?" "Access to the boardroom Monday morning. Harrington is going to call an emergency audit session to execute the frame. I need to be in that room when he does." "You're asking me to stake 12 years on a man I thought was fixing printers 3 weeks ago. I'm asking you to verify everything I just handed you and then make your own decision. You have 48 hours. Every document is independently time-stamped and federally certified. Check it all." She picked up the summary, read it again, looked at him with an expression that contained no gratitude, no romance, no softness, only the recognition of competence meeting competence across a table that was too small for what had just been placed on it. "Monday, 8 a.m. I'll have your name on the access list." That night, Marcus called Zoe. Her voice was sleepy, warm, already halfway into dreams. "Ba, tomorrow is Saturday. You're coming to Grandma's?" he confirmed. She yawned. "Ba is the best at fixing things." He held the phone against his ear until her breathing evened out and the line went quiet. And then he encrypted the final evidence package, uploaded backup copies to 3 independent secure servers, and verified every federal timestamp. The kitchen table held the full weight of 4 states, 38 ruined careers, and 14 million stolen dollars. Outside, Portland's rain had turned to mist, the kind that softened edges without erasing them. Monday was 47 hours away. I and Thomas Harrington would walk into that boardroom believing it was the last day of Carolyn Ashford's career. He would be half right. It would be the last day of someone's career. Monday, 8:03 in the morning. The 40th floor of Meridian Financial smelled like fresh coffee and the particular brand of tension that accumulates when powerful people gather in a room where someone's career is about to end. Thomas Harrington sat at the head of the glass conference table, his posture broadcasting the relaxed authority of a man who believed the script had already been written. 5 audit committee members flanked him, each with a leather portfolio and the cautious expression of professionals who understood that today's meeting was less an investigation than a sentencing. Derek Simmons occupied a chair near the window, his leg bouncing at a frequency that suggested his confidence was running on a thinner reserve than his boss's. And the company's general counsel sat at the far end, pen already uncapped. Caroline Ashford entered at 8:07. She wore a charcoal suit Marcus had never seen, and her stride carried the particular weight of a woman who had spent the weekend verifying every number, every timestamp, every federal certification on the documents a stranger had handed her in a coffee shop, and had arrived at the conclusion that the stranger was the only person in this building who had told her the truth. She took her seat at the opposite end from Harrington. Between them, 20 feet of polished mahogany, and 6 years of fraud. Thank you all for convening on short notice. Harrington opened with the measured warmth of a man who had rehearsed. The committee has identified significant irregularities in the Pacific Northwest Division's vendor payment records. Given the severity, we felt it necessary to address these findings directly with the division's current leadership. His eyes moved to Caroline. The implication landed like a dropped blade. Caroline did not flinch. Before we proceed, I've invited an independent systems consultant to present a forensic analysis relevant to the committee's concerns. I believe his findings will provide necessary context. She gestured toward the door. A Marcus Cole entered the boardroom carrying a laptop and a calm that did not belong to a man earning $22 an hour. He wore a pressed white shirt, no tie, and his federal forensic auditor credential hung from a lanyard against his chest where the IT contractor badge used to be. He took the empty seat beside the presentation screen and opened his laptop with the unhurried precision of a man who had organized this moment down to the paragraph. Harrington's recognition was immediate. The micro expression lasted less than a second, a flicker of confusion dissolving into something colder, before his boardroom composure reasserted itself. This is the IT contractor whose engagement was terminated last week. He has no standing in this proceeding. My name is Marcus Cole. I hold advanced certification from the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, and I was engaged by the Federal Accountability Office under Title 42, Section 1983, to conduct a covert forensic audit of Meridian Financial's vendor payment infrastructure. Marcus's voice filled the room at a register that made the air feel denser. The IT credentials were an operational cover. My standing in this proceeding is established by federal authority, not by your HR department. The silence that followed had a physical texture, like pressure changing before a storm. Two committee members exchanged glances. The general counsel's pen stopped moving. Marcus turned the laptop toward the projection screen and began. Slide 1. Apex Logistics. Employer Identification Number 472839401. This number does not exist in the IRS registry. Apex Logistics is a phantom entity, fabricated to receive wire transfers from Meridian's operating budget. He advanced. Slide 2 through 5. 73 transactions over 6 years, each structured below the $10,000 board approval threshold. Routing destination, Cayman National Bank, or account registered to Harrington Capital, LLC. The room's oxygen supply seemed to decrease with each slide. The beneficial owner of Harrington Capital, LLC is Thomas Raymond Harrington, currently seated at the head of this table. Harrington's hand moved toward the table's edge. This is fabricated. These documents have no verified chain of custody. Slide 6. Marcus did not raise his voice. He lowered it, and the reduction in volume forced every person in the room to lean forward. Every file carries a certified ACF digital forensic timestamp. Challenging my seal means challenging the federal regulatory body that issued it. I would advise counsel to consider carefully before pursuing that line. The general counsel placed his pen on the table and folded his hands. Slide 7. Audio recording from a departmental meeting, March 14th, 2021. Provided by former senior accountant Janet Murray, who was terminated 90 days after questioning Apex billing discrepancies. Marcus pressed play. Harrington's voice filled the boardroom, captured in the tinny clarity of a phone recording held beneath a conference table 3 years ago. Instructions to keep Apex transactions off the primary consolidation ledger. The voice was unmistakable. Three committee members turned to look at their chairman simultaneously. Marcus advanced to the final section. This fraud is not confined to Portland. Identical phantom vendor structures have been identified in Meridian branches in Seattle, Sacramento, and Denver. Total diversion across 4 states, $14.2 million. 38 employees were wrongfully terminated after raising concerns, all processed through the same HR channel. He paused, letting the number settle. The Department of Justice executed multi-state search warrants this morning at 6 a.m. Pacific. The conference room door opened. Two federal agents in dark suits entered with the quiet efficiency of people who had done this before and would do it again. One carried a folder. The other carried handcuffs. Harrington stood. His chair rolled backward and hit the glass wall with a sound that startled no one because every nerve in the room was already at its limit. His face had passed through anger and denial and arrived at a pale terrain that Marcus recognized as the geography of a man watching his own architecture collapse. Marcus looked at him. There was no satisfaction in the gaze, no vindication performed for an audience. Mr. Harrington, I am not here because I hate you. I am here because 38 people lost their jobs for telling the truth, and every one of them deserved someone who would finish what they started. The agents moved forward. Handcuffs closed around Thomas Harrington's wrists in the same boardroom where he had signed 6 years of fraudulent compliance certifications. Derek Simmons did not wait to be addressed. He asked for a lawyer before the agents reached his chair. Caroline stood at the far end of the table. Her eyes were red, but her back was straight, and her voice, when she addressed the remaining committee members, carried the absolute authority of a woman who had walked through the frame that was built for her and emerged holding the blueprints. The board will receive the full forensic report by end of business today. I expect formal clearance of all allegations against this division by Wednesday. Are there questions? There were none. The weeks that followed moved at the speed of institutional reckoning. Harrington and Simmons were indicted on federal fraud and civil rights charges. The Department of Justice expanded its investigation across 4 states. 38 wrongful termination cases were reopened. Janet Murray received a settlement and a formal letter of apology on Meridian letterhead, signed by the new board chair. She called Marcus the day it arrived, unable to speak for the first 30 seconds. When she found her voice, she told him that she had framed the letter and hung it in the office of the independent accounting practice she had opened the month before. Caroline implemented a new policy framework. All discrimination complaints routed to independent third-party review, bypassing internal HR entirely. The model was adopted by Meridian's national board within 90 days. Agent Rivera called Marcus on a Tuesday evening to inform him that the investigative methodology he had developed was being incorporated as a case study by the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Marcus thanked him and went back to helping Zoe with her math homework. 1 year later, a Sunday morning in a 2-bedroom apartment in a better part of East Side Portland. Not a penthouse, not a transformation into wealth. Just one additional room, a safer block, and a kitchen large enough for a table that didn't have to hold the weight of federal evidence anymore. Elena's photograph occupied the same position it always had, centered on the wall, now flanked by a Department of Justice commendation and a crayon drawing of a volcano with the words, "Maiba fixes everything" in uneven capitals. Zoe burst through the front door carrying a blue ribbon and a volcano that glowed red from the inside. Bah, first place. The judges said my lava was the most scientifically accurate. Marcus lifted her off the ground, and she laughed with the unself-conscious joy of a child who had been given the single most important thing a parent can provide: the unwavering evidence that she was seen. The doorbell rang. Carolyn stood in the hallway holding a bakery box, dressed in a way that had nothing to do with boardrooms. A soft sweater, her hair loose, the executive architecture set aside for the morning. I heard there was a science fair champion in this building. Zoe pulled her inside by the hand, already narrating the chemical reaction process at a velocity that required no response, only witness. Marcus poured coffee, black, no sugar, and placed it in front of Caroline without asking. She picked it up without thanking him. They had passed the point where the gesture required acknowledgement. It simply was. Later, while Zoe demonstrated the LED circuit for the fourth time, Marcus and Caroline stood on the small balcony. Portland stretched below them, washed clean by overnight rain, the kind of morning where the city looks like it is trying to start over. 12 of the 38 found new positions. Janet's firm just hired its third employee. Caroline's voice was quiet, factual, carrying the weight of outcomes rather than emotions. Good. You never take credit. Because it isn't mine. I organized the evidence. They endured 6 years. And the courage was theirs long before I arrived. She reached across the small distance between them and placed her hand on his. Not a grasp. An offering. Open, deliberate, giving him the choice. Marcus turned his palm upward. Her fingers settled into his, and the fit was firm, unhesitant, the kind of contact between two people who had built trust not through grand gestures, but through the accumulation of work done honestly in rooms where no one was watching. From inside the apartment, Zoe's voice carried through the open door. "Bah, Co-Caroline! The volcano's about to erupt again!" They both smiled, stepped inside. The morning continued in the ordinary, unremarkable way that the best mornings do, with coffee, with laughter, with a child's voice filling every corner of a home that had once been too quiet. Dignity is not something the world hands you. It is something you carry into every room, whether that room is a basement workstation or a 40th floor boardroom. And love, when it comes, does not arrive with thunder. It arrives like black coffee placed without asking, quietly, precisely, in the exact way you need it, by someone who paid attention long before you thought anyone was watching.